What's going on, man? How's your week?
Well, my week is pretty good. Finally got everything at the house done. So
Is it the whole remodel's done?
the whole remodel's done at this point. So
How do you like it? Was it worth the time, effort, and money?
well, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, the house is feels bigger. It feels easier to clean. Everything's pretty nice. Got the bathtub in finally. No leaking, so everything's working there.
Fair enough.
Kind of averted a disaster because we thought we were going to have to run another plug for it.
Yeah, for your fancy schmancy
For my
bathtub,
my
right?
fancy tub, that's right.
Yeah.
And we kind of figured out how we could do that where it can stay on 2 circuits instead of 3.
Yeah, okay.
So,
One of these days, I'd like to live in a house that has a bathtub big enough, or not big enough wide, they're all fine there, but long enough for me. I'm too tall, you know?
yeah, that they make them for sure.
Yeah.
That's one drawback on the one that I got right now, is that it's a little bit shorter than the one we had before. It's deeper, so it feels good that way, but can't really stretch out all the way in it. So I imagine it would be even harder for you.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever been real comfortable in a bathtub in my life.
Right. That was yeah, you'd have to get one of the bigger ones, like 72 inches or longer.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, my week was pretty good. A little inside baseball on the Turtlesmith deal. We just did some photo shoots. We're trying to up our thumbnail game. Calvin and I have really been hitting the algorithm, or trying our best to figure this nonsense out. It's a real difficult process, but it's been kind of interesting learning about all the different color schemes and brightness and variation that goes into that.
It's really funny. So I watch a lot of YouTube lately, and it's kind of a meta thing where people are breaking the fourth wall in a sense, where they often talk about they need to do this or that for the algorithm, or they can't say this or that for the algorithm.
Right.
It really is, like, in one sense, it's neat to listen to people talk about it. On the other hand, it's really kind of unnerving to realize how often that we end up doing things to please the algorithm, I guess, or to try to influence the algorithm.
Yeah, that's really what YouTube's about,
Like
all hail the master algorithm.
Yeah, like we're making ourselves kind of slaves to the algorithm.
Yeah, you have to, or else you won't get views, and that's what's important, right? Not really, I don't think. It's more about the information, but you got to get people to click on it.
It actually goes to a much deeper issue, in my opinion. It's the siloing of people. It's putting people in bubbles. Like, I've watched my own algorithm change now. So I've been more politically active, looking at various sources that I like to watch, and now I don't even hardly see any of the things that I used to be watching, which is more on science and design and innovation, stuff like that. So I've got to basically retrain it now. Now I've got to go search for those things.
Yeah, just so you can get them back in your
so I can get them flowing back in my feed. Now it's like showing me stuff that the people that I watch politically, it's like showing me their stuff from like a year ago, and I'm like, well, I don't want to see that. I want to see like their newest content plus the newest content from the other stuff that I was interested in.
Right. I wonder when algorithm, like what's in your scroll feed, is gonna take over, like personality wise. Like, you're out on a date and the girl's gonna be like, let me see your phone so
People
I can see
do
your
that already.
algorithm.
People do that already.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing on
Good
dates.
Lord.
People will ask to see each other's phones so that they can kind of get a sense of the stuff that they like, and see if they're if what they're presenting on the date is what they're actually like in person. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off. So yeah, I've seen that, that's kind of a thing these days, that people want to see. It's like a trust thing too,
That's wild. I kind of miss the old days where you could just lie through your teeth and nobody knew what you're talking about. Now everybody Googles you to verify.
Well, yeah. Now you can just lie to millions of people and nobody cares.
There you go. I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams.
Well, in this week, our first segment, we're going to talk about the very last step in phase 2, which is putting it all together. So in the first phase, we did our business plan. In the second phase, we've prepared. And now at this end of the second phase, we're going to just be putting it all together. So kind of exciting. You should be done and ready to start your business as of this step.
So if you had to guess, and I know that this question is probably pretty broad, but if you had to guess, if someone were like really serious about starting a business and they went through all these steps, what would you say would be a reasonable time frame?
So it depends on where you're at, like in your career and what kind of business you're going to start. But let's just say somebody who knew nothing about starting a business, starting fresh and was going from step 1 of phase 1 all the way to now, you could probably knock it out in somewhere around 4 weeks-ish, doing 3 or 4 hours a day, pretty easy. And that's really how long it should take. You should think for a month or so at least before you're starting your business and put in the time to do the research and everything like that. Now, if you're starting a business that you're already very familiar with and like for me, for example, I know most of this stuff, so I might be able to knock this out in a week or 2.
Okay. Because I was thinking about that the other day. We've gone through all this, and we talk about each one of these. Excuse me. We talk about each one of these steps in a weekly podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and by the time someone gets through all the podcasts, they're going to be 3 or 4 months into this.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want them to get the idea that the whole process can take even longer than that. Now it can, depending on the business.
It certainly can, yeah.
But from what you're saying right now, if you really get in and knock it out, only with if with only 3 or 4 hours a day, you're talking about a 4-week time frame.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to do that.
Yeah.
That's not very daunting. That seems more than reasonable.
With everything in life, I'm trying to learn Spanish, like I've talked about before, and I play a lot of golf, and it's really just about repetition. Putting in those 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day to get good. So if you just put in a little bit of time every day to try to get your business where it needs to be, to do the planning and the research, yeah, you should be fine in a pretty short time frame. It doesn't take years to get through all this nonsense.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go through this exercise ourselves. With the business that I'm already doing, that we're talking about possibly expanding.
Correct. Yeah. We'll be able to share some of that information. We've got our example Turtle Co., which is our promotional company where we're going to sell T-shirts and stuff. We're going to try to go through all of that as well. Try to get a proper business plan and preparation phase for everything, so everybody will have a good example.
Excellent. Yeah. So. Yeah, this is the part where it gets exciting. You're putting it all together. You've got your plans. You've got your feasibility. You've hopefully lined up some investors, or where you're going to get the money at. And even if you don't have the money right at this point in where you're putting it all together, at least you've got an idea of where to get it, and you've got your excuse me, you've got your elevator pitch down. Right, you've got your feasibility, you've got your finance. Help me out here. You got your financial planning set up so that you can know, your forecasting and what you should look like in a year and 16 months or 18 months, 2 years and so on.
Yeah, and if you're still kind of struggling finding your funding or lining up investors, now that you have everything done, it makes that process a lot easier. It's a lot easier to go ask an investor or talk to a bank or apply for an SBA loan if you already have everything ready to go.
Yeah.
So.
And, well, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No, after you.
Well, I was going to say, if you're a celebrity political candidate, you can even be like 800 to 1,000% off on your predictions and your pitch deck, and you'll just have millions of people investing in you anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, if you're those kind of guys,
you got to get your pitch deck right.
I don't suggest it because savvy investors or people who know will be able to tell. But the first thing you want to do in this step is to go back and go through all of phase 1 again, and you don't need to spend a lot of time. Just think about what you learned in phase 2 and update your information from phase 1. So you're going to want to update your elevator pitch. And remember, we've got 4 of those. We've got ones for our lenders or investors. We've got one for our employees. We've got one for our suppliers. And then that all important one, you got one for your customers. And then update your market research. Double check your brand development, and then go back through that training manual. Make sure you've got all the processes down that you're going to need to perform when you do your business, and then review your financial plan and just kind of update all of that stuff that we did in phase 1 from new things that we learned in phase 2. Then after you've got your business plan kind of all done and ready to go, you're going to want to get your business structure in place. Now's the time to go out and get your LLC or corporation documents put together. You got to apply with that for the Secretary of State, and either get a lawyer or accountant, or you can go to LegalZoom to get like your operating agreement and shareholder agreement or whatever legal documents you need. And then once you get your business all set up, you've got your great plan. Now you need to secure your funding, and that's obviously one of the more difficult parts of this. If you're not self-financing, you got to hit the ground, find investors, apply for SBA loans, which will have a lot of information about SBA loans and the different forms that you need to fill out on Turtlesmith. But funding is now the time to make sure that you have all of your funding secured and in place before you move on to phase 3, which is execute.
So,
go ahead.
On that topic, on the funding, so it seems to me that I've seen people kind of jump in and with the thought that they have enough funding to get started, but they don't really have enough funding to go very long.
Right.
And they sometimes get in with the misguided idea that they're going to have time, or they're going to still go out and be able to find more funding.
Yeah.
I personally don't recommend that approach, because that's that's not even the approach that I took. I took the approach of having no money and starting a business and thinking that I could find funding, and then struggling for many years and ending up having to take on partners that I really wasn't compatible with, things that sometimes ended in legal problems.
Well, and a little bit of that
disputes.
comes from desperation.
Yeah.
You get into a point where you have to have a certain amount of money to keep going, and so you're just kind of taking all comers. You're going to take a deal that's not so great. And
that's what happens. Is a lot of people get into business, they get going, they find themselves in a pickle financially, and they start taking on these high interest loans. Mm-hmm. These daily, payment loans and stuff like that are taken out, 30-40% of every dollar that they make. This is basically legal loan sharking, and it is
disaster.
Very, very difficult to keep a business running in that climate.
So our opinion at Turtlesmith is you will have the best chance of success if you have your company fully funded to last somewhere between 12 and 18 months, with making very little or no profit. And you have also taken care of your personal budget as well. You got to throw in your personal budget. I think a lot of times business owners forget about that. Mm-hmm. They get enough money to start and they think, I can just pay myself out of profits. Well, you might not make profits for a while, and so you're just going to end up sunk if you don't have that extra capital.
Right.
So investors and SBA loans both take into account working capital and a small salary for the owners usually. So that can be a part of your pitch deck or your funding request.
And actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think investors and institutional investors will look at that, and if you haven't planned for that, then that shows a little bit of lack of maturity in your planning.
Sometimes they'll at least ask you about it. Maybe you have some savings that you can live on or something like that. So they just want to make sure that you've taken into account what you're going to live on.
Right.
Because then it'll just be a detriment to the business.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not able to live and provide for your family, while you're building your business, then an investor looks at that and they go, well, that's going to take your mind away from business. It's going to make you make irrational decisions.
Absolutely. So once you get your funding in place, you want to make sure that you have all your licenses if you need any. Make sure you have your federal and state licenses, permits, everything that you need to legally operate your specific industry. And then the first thing you need to go out and buy with your funding is insurance. Do not forget to get insurance. Do not skimp on insurance. But, don't go insurance poor like you had talked about in the insurance podcast. You want to make sure that you have a good safety net, but not overdo it and just make yourself broke. And then you're going to want to get all your books set up. So get that QuickBooks Online going, get a business bank account going. Again, remember we talked about piercing that corporate veil. You do not want to intermingle your business and personal expenses. So make sure you have a separate business account. And if you do need money out of there for your personal expenses, you can just transfer it to your personal account, either by a distribution or a paycheck. Once your books are all set up, then you're going to want to make sure that if you have employees, all your federal and state accounts are set up so that you can pay your payroll taxes and make sure to file everything on time. You may even want to consult with an accountant or tax preparer to make sure you got everything in order. And then the final kind of step of this, putting it all together, is just reviewing that scaling strategy. I'm a big proponent of when you're just starting out to have big goals in the end so that all of the decisions that you're making at the beginning are kind of informed by where you're trying to get. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a lot about that here at the with this podcast, the Turtlesmith podcast, of thinking about where we want to be in 5 or 10 years and trying to make decisions based on that end goal.
So one of my customers, who himself was a pretty savvy real estate and business guy, mm-hmm. Down in Dallas. He said something to me one time along the lines of, we shouldn't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up. We should ask them what they want to do mm-hmm. when they grow up, and then what they do can inform what they become as far as a career. Or, if somebody says, well, I want to travel the world all the time, well, okay, then you can become a travel writer, or you can become a billionaire and, jet set around the world.
Yeah.
Or you can just be a nurse that sets yourself up in the type of nursing that affords you a lot of time off, if mm-hmm. if that's what you want. But thinking about it in terms of all the things that you would like to do, your financial goals and so on, which we don't teach kids enough of, I don't think.
No, we really slack on financial literacy and education in this country, and I think it's intentional somewhat. It keeps us dumb.
Yeah, we get kids romantically involved with the notion of being things, mm-hmm. right? Like a firefighter or a teacher or a basketball player or whatever. And we don't correlate that too much with, what those things entail as far as the rest of life goes, So I talk to my daughter a lot about that, and she wants to be an entertainer. She wants to be on Broadway. Mm-hmm. And I try to talk to her about the business of entertainment so that she understands, what place that she'll be comfortable in, that if she wants to be a superstar, then, okay, go for that. And these are the things you have to be careful of. If you want to be like a mid-range performer, where you've got steady work throughout many productions, then that's a different set of characteristics and considerations.
And nothing wrong with that either. There's a lot of people who make a good living just
absolutely
middle of the road type deal.
But what I don't want her to do is I don't want her to like think to herself, I'm going to be a superstar, and if I don't reach that, then my life is a failure.
Right.
And then end up one of those people who's perpetually, broke because you want to live a superstar lifestyle, but you're on a middle-class income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One final point on this kind of step is all of your financial planning, your scaling strategy, your elevator pitch, all this stuff, it's not locked into stone. There will be changes as you go, as you learn more, as you get your business started. Things might change, so just be open to the way things are going. Be open to change, be open to making an adjustment if things aren't working exactly as you hoped they were. Don't try to just be locked into one thing.
Right. Well, that goes along with Mike Tyson's whole deal. Everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face.
Right. Yeah, that's a great quote.
And in business, there will be things like that happen. There have been times, when our laser has broken and we've only got one at the shop, and so we have to wait until the guy comes to fix it. Or, There are shops out there that literally buy two of everything whenever they buy anything, just to make sure they've always got a backup.
Yeah, and I don't think it matters what business you're in. You're going to get punched in the face at least once or twice.
Yeah.
So it's all just about making sure for every step back that you take, you're getting a couple steps forward. So, and then just keep at it, and you'll hopefully be successful.
Yeah, and get rich slowly.
Get
like
rich
is
slowly.
Our motto.
Yeah, that is our motto. Any thoughts on phase 1 or phase 2?
No, I think that, this would be a good time to really look back through everything, make sure that you haven't made any real glaring errors. If you have somebody else in your life looking at it, that would be a good time for them to look at it.
Yeah. Do not be afraid to get lots of advice.
Yeah. One thing I find is when I start to plan out something, I'll create a spreadsheet, and I'll have a real tendency to be super optimistic when I should be real pessimistic. You want to be real conservative in your calculations, to plan for worst case scenarios and things like that as much as you possibly can, without being, so conservative that you say, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, well, if you can get your numbers to work on a conservative estimate, then, everything else on top is just gravy.
And that's how I look at it as well, but I will delve into fantasy sometimes, and tweak the numbers to make them look good, the kind of what if numbers, the best case scenario type numbers. And it's okay to do that, I think, but it's not okay to go with it because of those things that can go wrong, and your need to be flexible and to pivot. So that's a good time to kind of go back through your numbers and make sure that you haven't let anything, creep in that is overly optimistic.
Yep. Well, next week we're going to start with phase 3, and that is the execution phase. So if you're done and ready and you've got your funding, your business plan set, now it's time to go out and make that money.
So next episode, we're starting a business?
Well, next episode, we're starting with our step 1 of phase 3, and we're going to go through that.
All right.
But this is the exciting part. It's not, you've done most of the hard work. Now it's time to get after it and get your business started.
All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good wrap up of where we're at this point. So, This episode is sponsored by JB Cases. JB Cases is a pool cue case company specializing in custom cases. They have been in business since 2007, and their motto is true protection, true durability, true comfort, and true custom. Visit them at jbcases.com.
So I guess in this segment, we're going to talk about there's an ass for every seat. Mm-hmm. It's one that you wanted to chat about. And I think it's kind of like the adage we talked about before, right? The customer is always right, but in the actual idiom, it's in matters of taste, the customer is always right.
That is correct, yes. So we do mostly custom designs for the pool cue cases that we make. And one thing that I always tell my customer service guys and is don't tell a customer that something that they're designing looks bad.
Yeah.
Now, what I do say to customers, and this comes up a little bit more, sometimes they'll put us on the spot, and they'll say, well, what do you think about how it looks, right? Because they're obviously needing some kind of validation or approval. Then a lot of times what I'll say to them is I'll say, well, that's not how I would have designed it. My tastes run a little bit different. But the most important thing for me is that a year from now, you don't look at that and think to yourself, I wish I hadn't done it. Mm-hmm. So I just tell them to, feel free to make a few other designs to kind of play around with different color combinations. I said they can save as many as they like, and then go through them, But I'll say all that to avoid saying, no, what you created is really fucking ugly.
How often does that happen to you when you open a package or you see a design and you're just like, that's not what I would have done?
It happens maybe once every couple weeks or so.
Yeah.
When I'll pull something out and I'll be like, that's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So there you go, folks. If there's any crossover here with the viewers and you happen to be watching this and you happen to watch my weekly showcases, whenever you see me say, that's interesting, that's my code for I probably wouldn't have done it that way.
I don't think you should have given that away.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to change your whole customer service face and adages.
Yeah.
Well, but does it really matter? I mean, at the end of the day, like,
No,
who cares whether you liked it or not? If the customer is happy, that's all that matters.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Right there, right? It's understanding that business is not always just about what you like, what the person who owns the business likes. It's about realizing that there's all kinds of different people, and pool cues is a good example. We will often have people say, what does this cue hit like? What does it basically what they're asking is, what does it feel like?
Mm-hmm.
And a very skinny cue is normally, we're going to call that kind of whippy. In Europe or in Germany, they say it's soft, meaning it has a lot of flex to it. Then if you have a cue that's a little bit more solid, it's known to be stiff. But here's the thing, right? You take a cue that has got a thin shaft, or a thin taper, put it in someone's hands, 5 people, you'll get 5 different answers as to how that cue plays or how it feels.
Right.
And those answers could range from very whippy to very hard, And it's the exact same cue.
I guess it would just depend on what they're used to and kind of their play style and that kind of thing.
Yeah. This actually came to an experiment done by these guys that ran a tournament series back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they had a tournament where they had a number of professional players there and very good players. So what they did is they took a lot of their cues and they taped them up so that people couldn't tell what cue it was just by looking at it or holding it. And they had the players rate how the cues felt. They had a bunch of criteria, were they stiff, were they whippy, were they responsive or whatever. I don't know what all the criteria were. And one of the players who won that year most of the stops on the Pro Tour, and he was a number 1 player, and he was sponsored by a famous company, was adamant that a particular cue was his cue, and he knew that was his cue, and he knew exactly how it felt, and he played and everything. And when the cue was unwrapped, it had the characteristics that were completely, I don't want to say opposite of his cue, but if people were talking about the characteristics of cues, they would say, well, that is opposite. So the cue you play with would be considered to be whippy.
That must be embarrassing.
The cue that you thought was your cue, most people would consider to be stiff. So, yeah, it probably was kind of embarrassing. But it also illustrated another point, that a lot of people really associate performance with looks or reputation or name brand more than they really understand performance and know how to rate things. So I learned that if I'm trying to sell somebody a pool cue, I don't tell them how it plays. I hand them the pool cue and I say, you tell me how it plays.
Fair enough.
So it used to be the other way around, where I would be trying to push people into certain characteristics. Then I had an experience, where a guy wanted a real whippy cue, and I handed him one that was the thinnest shaft that I had, and he came back and said it was too stiff. Then he picked up something that was a literal tree trunk. I mean, probably, a good baseball player could have, upped his stats with this thing.
Yeah.
And the guy comes back 30 minutes later. He's like, this is the best cue I've ever played with.
Yeah, so he just didn't really know what he wanted.
Well, that's probably true.
I wonder how often that happens and when you're trying to sell stuff to people and they don't really know what they want.
I think that happens a lot. So
Yeah.
in our case, it certainly happens a lot where people will call us up and they'll want something, but they're not sure. They're not sure what size pockets they need. They're not they're not sure of the color schemes.
I suppose that you just got to educate them at that point, right?
And we
Customer
do.
education.
Yeah, and we do. I try to talk to people about what they carry and kind of what they need. And, some people are hoarders. They want to have every gadget made and they want to have it all in their pool cue case,
Yeah.
And some people are OCD hoarders where they want to have every gadget made, but they also want to have it organized exactly as the right way. and some people are minimalist. They just figure, I'm going to carry, one thing to sand my tip and a piece of chalk, and that's it. And they don't want all the pockets and everything. They basically ideally want the smallest possible pocket that they can fit the least amount of things in it that they can possibly get away with to go play pool.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about the guy not knowing which pool cue was his. I was just thinking back, I think in like 5th grade or something like that, we did the Pepsi Coke challenge. That was a big thing at the time, whether you could tell the difference between Pepsi and Coke. I don't think anybody really knew. I half guessed correctly, but half were incorrect. But people get so adamant about what they like, and then they really just don't know the difference.
That is true. Most people these days are disconnected from the making of things.
Yeah.
And they're so disconnected from it that they are influenced by other people's opinions who themselves are ignorant of the making of things. And it's really crazy to see that sometimes. I see that a lot. Like I've had the fortune, I want to say, to be involved in a lot of projects outside of making pool cue cases. But in the billiard industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a lot of behind the scenes kind of information. And when I say behind the scenes, I'm talking about like name brands that people would know, would instantly recognize. I've been involved with projects dealing with those name brands, so I've been privy to a lot of decisions that aren't public.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always interesting to me to see people talk about these name brands authoritatively as if they know what these brands are doing and what they're deciding and why they're deciding what they're deciding and who's making the things with those brands on it and so on. And I just squirm so much because there's sometimes that I just really want to say something, but I know that I can't because I've got to adhere to the non-disclosures that I signed, and plus just general ethics of information that I was trusted with at being part of those projects. And it just kills me. It kills me so much to see these people just out there talking ignorantly about these things, and other people that are even further removed from these brands are buying into it, and then repeating it, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen to my own product, so I know that as well, And anyway, that's just something that's out there, is that there's a lot of misinformation that informs people's decisions and leads them down the wrong path,
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, when we come back to the topic, there's an ask for every seat, right? Part of that is financial, so someone might look at my product and say, wow, well, I recognize that your product is, number one in its field. And I'm saying that only because that's a thing that people say about us, right? They will say, that JB cases are obviously number one,
It's
or
all right
whatever.
to brag a little.
And but then you will see someone say, but if I can't afford a JB case, or I can't get a JB case, then I'll be just as happy with this XYZ knockoff, right? That's like $100 cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize, that they're getting a case that is actually dangerous to their cues, because in order to sell it for $100 cheaper, one of two things has to be true. Either they made the case as well as we make it, and they're willing to take less profit, because they haven't magically like made it for less cost than we can make it. So they've got to be near to us in the cost to make it. So they're just willing to take less profit, assuming that there's $100 profit in there, right? Or they had to take a lot of shortcuts somewhere in there to get the cost down to be able to sell it for $100 less. And I have never seen it be the former until now. So I've only seen it be the latter. So where this fits in what we're saying here, there's an ask for every seat, right? Is there are plenty of people out there that are their budget is literally in, let's just picking a number out of air, say $150 for a Q case. That's the maximum that they want to spend. That's the maximum they'll ever spend. For those people, they like the types of designs that we make, but they're never going to allow themselves to spend, $250 on my case. So therefore, the people making knockoffs are satisfying that part of the market. And I know that. And there's no way that I can get to that part of the market. So at least not, with the cost that I have now.
Yeah.
So that's one way that's helped me to find a little bit of zen here to be calmer about the proliferation of knockoffs of my product, just to understand that what I make is not in everybody's budget. But there are things that are in people's budgets, and if they happen to look like ours, then I take some kind of solace in the fact that the design itself is attractive enough to attract them, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes those things they're designed like my case, but they are just ugly as hell, like the color combinations that they put together for these things, but people still buy them. And then I'm reminded, that in matters of taste, the customer is always right. So, if you want pink and brown,
go for it.
Yeah.
Well, as a small business owner, I think it's important to not skip that market research step, from our phase one, and really just narrow down on the demographics and the groups that you're trying to target, because those are the people who are going to be buying your products, and they may not always like what you like.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, you're going to be, it depends on what you're doing. Let's say you have a shop, you sell T-shirts, right? You're going to see some funky T-shirt designs that don't make any sense to you. I get cases all the time. People design things. They put their own symbols on there, or their own whatever interests them, Mm-hmm. You're into Dungeons and Dragons, for example,
I am.
So we've had people do D&D stuff on the case. We've had people do...
Those sound like good guys.
Huh?
Those sound like good people.
Oh, I'm sure they are, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by JB Cases. JB Cases is a pool cue case company specializing in custom cases. They have been in business since 2007, and their motto is true protection, true durability, true comfort, and true custom. Visit them at jbcases.com.
Well, in this next segment, we're going to do something kind of fun. Top 5 riskiest businesses. I know what they are. You're going to guess. And we'll also talk about some safe businesses as well.
Okay.
So
right.
just
so
give
I
me
get
a
to
shot.
guess?
Anyone you want.
All right. This is like Family Feud. I'm going to say, is it like anything that's on the top 5, or do I have to try to guess like which is the number 1?
So anything on the top 5, and fair enough, there were a ton of different lists from different years and everything. I've kind of compiled these. Each one of these were on multiple lists.
All right, I'm going to say a restaurant.
Believe it or not, a restaurant was in the top 10, but not in the top 5.
Really?
Which is shocking to me, because I've always heard restaurants were extremely risky, but they also take into account a lot of limited service and food trucks, which have actually become relatively popular and a little bit less risky to start.
Oh, I can see food trucks being very profitable.
Yeah, and I think they mix that in.
I wouldn't consider that risky at all.
Well, I think it's a little bit swayed in that direction, and I think post-COVID, restaurants are really booming, especially in Oklahoma City. They seem to be doing really well.
They are, I think. There were a number of restaurants that closed, which I think helped with the other restaurants that managed to stay open.
Yep.
So yeah, it seems like they're generally doing pretty good.
All right, give another guess.
Okay, another guess of something risky to start. I would say, let's see, something that's risky to start. Man, I'm trying to think of something. So I'm trying to think something that's maybe capital intensive.
I'll give you a hint on one of them. General contracting or starting a construction company is considered very risky, but there is a subset of the construction that's the most risky to start.
So that's an interesting one, because I would think the general contracting wouldn't be that risky to start, but the actual starting of a business that's actually building something? So the contractors themselves?
Well, so that's what I meant, and I apologize if that was confusing. Being a general contractor and building homes or rental properties can be a less risky business, but doing the actual contracting portions, the subcontractors, so framing, roofing, those kind of things,
Right.
are all considered risky. But there is one aspect of that that's the most risky.
Electricians.
Close. It was carpentry.
Really?
Carpentry is apparently very risky business, and I think it has to do particularly with custom cabinets and stuff when you have all of the investment of woodworking tools and all the stuff that you need to make it happen. So yeah, considered the second riskiest business,
Wow.
right behind one that I'm very heavily involved in.
Tax preparation?
No, that's a pretty safe one. It's actually oil and gas extraction is the
Okay.
number one riskiest business in 2024 right now. We have slowed down on a lot of our drilling because after my dad passed away, we stopped drilling so much. But it's very risky to try to be an independent oil producer in 2024. There's just too many big people.
Okay, so I understand that you said there's too many people, so there's a lot of competition. But
There's too many big companies who just
Okay.
come and buy out huge leases and tons of land, and they run you over. So unless you got quite a bit of money, and then the problem is in oil and gas, only about 1 in 9 oil wells actually make a profit. So you drill 8 dry holes or a couple that produce, to make enough money to pay themselves back, but not a profit.
see, that's the thing. I would have thought that independent drillers, or I guess I don't know what you call them, would be far less today.
It's hard. So the wells we drill, vertical wells, they only go in western Kansas, about 5,000 feet at most. And we just drill vertical wells, not those horizontal ones. And our dry hole costs are around $500,000. And so $500,000 just to see if there's actually oil there for one well. And we got to drill 9 of those to make one work.
That sounds very risky.
And so you really what we do is I own like 1 to 5% of different wells. And so we just drill 100 of them, over a 3 or 4 year period. And then, 1 out of 9 work and I own a little bit of it. And that's how we make our money back.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's actually pretty cool, though, that you can still find oil that the big guys haven't found.
Yeah, it happens every day. The little oil wells, or sometimes we go back and re-drill leases that like my great-grandpa drilled that we still have lease rights on or own the mineral rights. We'll go back and drill and find new pockets, and with new technology, we can do better drilling. So
Do you ever go deeper in wells that you've already been in?
So there's a point where you hit this granite about 6,000 feet down, and there's nothing below it.
Nothing below that,
Guys have
okay.
tried to drill down below it, and there's nothing there.
Okay.
So, there's a hard limit to how deep you can drill, and it's different by McPherson, Kansas, where my family's from. It's only about 3,500 feet, and then as you go closer to Colorado, that granite shelf dips and it goes down to about 6,000 feet.
Now I know this is a little bit off topic, but so people say fossil fuels, but I've heard chatter that oil that's in the ground might be coming from other sources rather than just dead fossils.
Well, it's not when you
Oh,
say
it's actually dead
when you
fossils.
say
It's kind of
fossils,
oxymoron.
it's not like a bunch of dinosaurs. It's really
Right.
just organic plant matter and stuff like that died and got
Right. I knew that
pressurized
part
and
of
became
it.
oil.
Yeah, I knew that part of it. It's not like the dead dinosaurs. Yeah, that I get. But is there any truth in your knowledge that oil might be produced in other ways or coming from other sources? Or?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I mean, it may be. There's a lot to the world I don't know about, but no, as far as I know, it's all just fossil fuel oil
Okay.
that we get anyway. Okay, so oil and gas extraction, we got off topic there. And then carpentry. Oil and gas is 1, carpentry is number 2. Can you guess what number 3, 4, or 5 is?
An auto racing team.
You know what? That didn't show up on the list, but that is probably extremely risky. I don't think that really counts as a business, though, because that's probably just a bunch of rich guys screwing around at some point.
Well, I mean, they run them like businesses.
I mean, they do, but, it's pretty wild. That and horse racing, I'm sure, is crazy, but I think that's just the activities for guys who like cars and
Those are
already
just
made
like-
their
like-
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Expensive hobbies.
No, number 3 is actually rental stores. So like DVD rentals, game rentals, video games. Stuff
Yeah,
like
I
that.
imagine that would
It's a
probably be
terrible
pretty hard
business.
these days.
That was number 3. Although Family Video was still rocking around Oklahoma up until just a few years ago. I don't know if they're out of business or something, but
So what's interesting is, at least in my business, we have a brand of cues called Palmer cues, and that brand of cues was started by the Palmer family, who made their money in video rental stores.
oh, okay.
And I'm not sure if they were called. I want to say they were called Palmer Video, but they might have been called something else. But they had a small chain of video stores, and then they turned around and used that money to start a billiard cue manufacturing. And they were pretty big in the 70s.
That Family Video or whatever it was here in Oklahoma City, I always heard the rumor, and just like I've always heard the rumor about mattress stores, that they were fronts for like the mob or something like that. I don't know how they did it, but they rented videos for like $1 up until 2020.
It's really funny because there was a bookstore near my house in one of the places we lived, and it was such an interesting place, and I always used to walk by there going to and from school.
Yeah.
And I never ever found it open, ever.
Okay.
And I asked my mom about it one day, because we'd go to the flea market a lot and we'd find old books, stuff like that. And I loved books when I was a kid, so I always wanted to kind of go in there and browse around. And she said something to me back when I was a kid. She goes, "Oh, that's just a mob front. They're never open." and back then I didn't really understand what it meant.
Yeah.
But now I do understand, because there are a lot of businesses where they can run cash through the books, but the place is actually never open. So,
fair enough. The next one on the list, you probably won't guess, is agricultural startups. So starting a new farming business, things like
farm.
that. Yeah, date farms are terrible because they take so long for the trees to mature. But beekeeping especially was considered risky. A lot of people have been getting into beekeeping. You see a lot of guys with the local honey and stuff like that. It's just a tough business to make any money in. All the expense and time and effort, and
especially when you lose your whole colony,
right?
To some kind of disease.
Yeah, but one thing that is considered sort of a good business in the agricultural space, and actually in the oil and gas space, is all the ancillary products. I used to know a guy who we need a lot of water hauled in the oil and gas business, and the guys who had the water trucks, they made a fortune. They would just come out and get the water, back and forth. And a lot of ancillary services like pesticides or products for agricultural use are really good businesses. And the last riskiest business on our number 5 list is actually manufacturing in the U.S.
Just generally manufacturing?
Generally manufacturing. It's very difficult to start a new manufacturing facility in the U.S., depending on what you're doing. But
so I would like to study that a little bit more, because I think that is probably true on the largest of scales. And it's less true on the smaller of scales. I think that one of the small business growth areas has been small manufacturing, where people have, 5-10 people, and you're just turning out a small product.
Yeah, I think the manufacturing is risky just because of the ridiculous investment that you need up front, usually for machinery and equipment and stuff like that. But if you have some kind of process or thing that can make it a little easier or cheaper to get into.
Yeah, I mean, there is a statistic in America that America, we are actually at the highest manufacturing level that we've ever been. It's just that we're doing it with less humans.
Yeah, clever. Well, there you go. That's kind of our list of risky versus safe businesses. You didn't really do very well on the guessing, but that's all right.
I was terrible on that, man. I really would have thought restaurants would have been a much worse.
I would have thought too, but on all the lists I looked, they were always like number 9 or 10. They weren't very high.
Still on the list of risky businesses, though.
They are, yeah.
But any business just about can be way safer if you follow Turtlesmith's guide to getting rich slow, doing it foundationally, planning it out correctly. Basically, all the shit that I didn't do that cost me, I want to say an extra 20 years of heartache to become a 20-year startup.
You nailed it.
So, yeah.
Nailed the pitch.
Don't do all of that. and you will get rich slow, but a lot faster than it took somebody like me who did it the harder way.
Right on. Okay, well, I guess that wraps this up, man. Find us on turtlesmith.com, and we'll see you next week.
That's all right. See you guys next week. Have a good business week, and make a lot of profit.